In 1987, a 28-year-old nurse in Phoenix took out a $12,000 loan to buy a car. Her bank manager sat across from her, explained the terms, shook her hand, and said, "Congratulations," like it was an achievement, like borrowing money was something to celebrate. She paid it off in 4 years, felt proud, and immediately took out another loan for a newer car. She did this 6 times over the next 3 decades. 6 car loans, each one a little bigger than the last. Each one celebrated by a banker who got paid a commission for originating it. She retired at 64 with a paid-off house, a nice car in the driveway, and $47,000 in savings. Her financial advisor told her she was doing fine. She was not doing fine. She was doing what the system trained her to do perfectly. Borrow, pay, borrow again, feel normal about it. Die with just enough to not be a burden and not enough to ever really be free. The car loans weren't the problem. The car loans were the symptom. The problem was something nobody ever explained to her. Something that isn't taught in schools, isn't covered in most personal finance books, and that the entire financial services industry has a profound economic interest in keeping you confused about. There are 2 kinds of debt in the world. One kind builds wealth on your behalf while you sleep. The other kind transfers wealth away from you quietly, month after month, for your entire adult life. And the terrifying part is that most people never learn to tell them apart. They treat a mortgage and a car loan as roughly equivalent financial instruments. They treat a student loan and a business loan as variations on the same theme. They take on obligations that feel manageable and normal and socially endorsed without ever running the actual math on what those obligations are costing them. In compounding wealth, they will never build. I'm going to show you that math today. And I'm warning you in advance, it's going to make you angry, not at yourself, at a system that profits from your confusion and has spent decades making sure you stay confused. Here's what we're covering. I'll break down the specific mechanism by which ordinary, socially acceptable, widely celebrated debt quietly destroys the financial futures of people who do everything else right. I'll show you the real compounding cost of carrying consumer debt, not the interest rate, the actual lifetime wealth destruction in dollar terms. I'll explain why minimum payments are mathematically one of the most elegant wealth transfer mechanisms ever designed. And I'll walk you through the specific decision framework that separates people who use debt as a tool from people who get used by debt as a product. I built a free debt cost calculator because most debt payoff calculators only show you how much interest you'll pay. This one shows you what that money would have been worth in an index fund, which is the number that actually matters. Link in the description. I only need your email to send the report. I don't store financial data. Let me start with a concept that most people have heard of, but almost nobody actually feels in their gut the way they need to. Compound interest. You know the quote, usually misattributed to Einstein, about compound interest being the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. It sounds cute. Let me show you what it actually means in dollar terms over a real lifetime, and I promise it stops being cute very quickly. You're 25 years old. You carry $8,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest, which is close to the current national average. You make minimum payments. Here's what happens. In the first month, your minimum payment is maybe $160. Of that, approximately $147 goes to interest. You reduced your actual debt by $13. $13. You paid $160 and knocked $13 off the principal. Month after month, the interest is consuming almost the entirety of every payment you make, with a tiny sliver going to actual debt reduction. If you only ever make minimum payments on that $8,000, you will be making payments for approximately 28 years. You will pay back the $8,000 you borrowed, plus roughly $19,000 in interest. Total outlay, $27,000 for $8,000. And that's before we run the opportunity cost number, which is the one that will actually keep you up at night. If instead of paying $19,000 in interest over 28 years, you had invested that money at 7% returns, you would have approximately $62,000. So the real cost of carrying that $8,000 in credit card debt to minimum payments isn't $19,000. It's $62,000 in wealth you never built. That's the number. That's what a normal, socially unremarkable amount of credit card debt costs an average person over a lifetime of minimum payments. Not $8,000, not even $19,000. $62,000 of compounding wealth transferred from your future to a bank's present. And the bank celebrates this. They call you a valued customer. They send you limit increase offers. They congratulate you on your responsible payment history while quietly extracting the equivalent of a down payment on a house from your financial future. This is not an accident. The minimum payment structure was designed with precision, not to help you pay off debt, to maximize the duration of your debt, to keep you in the system as long as possible, paying interest as long as possible, while giving you just enough forward motion to feel like you're making progress. The minimum payment is not a helpful suggestion. It is an extraction mechanism, and it works with brutal efficiency on millions of people who are doing exactly what they were told, paying on time, being responsible, following the rules. Let me tell you about a guy I know. We'll call him Marcus. He's 34, has a good job, makes $82,000, pays his bills on time, has a credit score of 740. He's proud of that score. He should be. It's genuinely good. But here's his balance sheet. He has $6,200 on one credit card, $4,800 on another, $11,000 left on a car loan at 7.4%, $31,000 in student loans at 5.8%, and $0 in any investment account outside of a 401k. He contributes 3% to just enough to get the employer match. He feels okay about this. His payments are manageable. He's not behind on anything. He's doing, by most cultural measures, fine. But let's run his actual numbers. The credit card debt at average rates will cost him somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 in total interest if he carries it for years, making minimum payments, which people do. The car loan over its remaining term costs him another $2,400 in interest. The student loans, spread over their remaining repayment period, will cost him another $12,000 to $18,000 depending on his repayment plan. Total interest Marcus will pay in his lifetime on debt he currently considers normal and manageable, somewhere between $29,000 and $40,000. Now run the opportunity cost. If Marcus had invested that $29,000 to $40,000 instead of paying it in interest at 7% returns over 30 years, that's $220,000 to $305,000 in wealth he will not have at retirement. Not because he did anything wrong, not because he's irresponsible, because he did exactly what the system told him to do. He used credit, he made payments, he carried balances that felt manageable, and the system extracted $250,000 of his future wealth in the process. This is not a Marcus problem. This is a system problem that affects tens of millions of Marcuses. Here's where I want to be precise about something, because not all debt is the same, and collapsing them all into a single category is as misleading as pretending none of it matters. There's a genuine distinction between debt that acquires assets, which appreciate and generate return, and debt that funds consumption of assets that depreciate or disappear. A mortgage on a reasonably priced home in a stable market is secured against an asset that typically appreciates over time. The debt has a cost, yes, but you're also building equity in something real. A business loan that funds productive capacity, equipment, inventory, systems that generate revenue is debt that can generate returns exceeding its cost. Done right, it's leverage. It builds wealth on your behalf. A student loan for a degree with strong, measurable income return relative to its cost, in a field where the degree is genuinely a prerequisite and the income increase is real, can be a reasonable investment in human capital. These are what I'd call productive debt. They're tools. They can be used well or badly, but they at least have the potential to create value exceeding their cost. Then there's what I call consumptive debt, credit card balances for things you've already consumed. Car loans for vehicles that lose value from the moment you drive them. Financing for furniture, appliances, electronics. Buy now, pay later schemes. Personal loans for vacations. Store credit cards open for a 15% discount that snowball into 24% ongoing interest. These don't acquire anything appreciating. They don't generate income. They fund the present at the explicit cost of the future. And in a culture that has normalized them completely, where 80% of Americans carry some consumer debt, where the average household carries over $7,000 in credit card debt alone, where buy now, pay later has exploded because it felt like it made expensive things accessible. They are quietly the most effective wealth destruction mechanism in the modern economy. I want to spend some time on something that doesn't get talked about enough, which is the psychological engineering behind consumer debt. Because this is not just economics. This is behavioral science deployed at scale against people who don't know they're being targeted. Credit card companies have spent decades and billions of dollars studying human psychology and designing products that maximize spending and minimize payoff behavior. Here's some of what they've learned and implemented. First, separating the pain of payment from the pleasure of purchase. When you pay cash for something, you experience the pain of spending and the pleasure of getting simultaneously. Studies show this creates natural friction that reduces the amount people spend. When you put it on a card, the pleasure is immediate and the pain is deferred, abstract, and distributed across a future billing cycle you're not thinking about right now. That separation is not incidental. It's the entire product design. It was figured out through decades of consumer behavior research and implemented intentionally to increase spending. Second, the minimum payment anchoring effect. When your statement shows a minimum payment of $35 on a $1,200 balance, your brain anchors to $35 as the relevant payment amount. Not because $35 is sensible, but because it's the number that's been made salient. Research consistently shows that presenting a minimum payment figure causes people to pay less than they would have in the absence of that anchor. The minimum payment isn't just an option. It's a suggestion your brain treats as a social norm. And it was designed that way. Third, rewards programs. This is the masterstroke. Credit card companies pay for rewards programs out of interchange fees and, more significantly, out of the interest paid by people who carry balances. The math is clear and has been studied extensively. Rewards card users spend more than non-rewards card users, significantly more. The psychological mechanism is that spending on a rewards card feels like earning something, which reframes the purchase from loss to gain. You're not spending $200 on a dinner, you're earning 200 points. The net effect is that people who carry balances subsidize the rewards of people who pay in full, while paying more themselves due to higher interest rates on rewards cards compared to basic cards. The rewards program is a mechanism for making high spending feel virtuous, while extracting maximum interest from people who can least afford it. Here's the part that genuinely angers me when I really look at it directly. The demographics of who carries high-interest consumer debt are not random. They skew toward lower and middle-income households, younger people, people with less financial education, people who are already financially stressed and using credit to bridge gaps in income. The people most systematically targeted by high-interest consumer debt products are the people least equipped to absorb the cost and most vulnerable to the compounding harm. A wealthy person with a $10,000 credit card balance and a $500,000 investment portfolio experiences that balance as a minor inconvenience. A working class person with a $10,000 credit card balance and $2,000 in savings experiences it as a trap with no visible exit. The financial harm compounds in inverse proportion to the financial capacity of the person experiencing it. The system extracts the most from the people who can afford it least, and then frames it as a personal responsibility failure when someone can't pay it off. Let me show you what a different approach looks like in practice, because I want to be clear, this isn't just critique. The debt trap is escapable. Not easily and not quickly, but systematically, and the math is on your side once you're pointed in the right direction. Here's the framework I'd use. Step 1 is complete visibility. Before you can fix anything, you need to see everything. Write down every single debt, the balance, the interest rate, the minimum payment, and the actual monthly cost of carrying it. Not the minimum plus any additional you could throw at it. Most people have never done this exercise in full honesty. They know roughly what they owe, but haven't confronted the total number or the total monthly extraction in one place. Do it. The discomfort is information. Step 2 is triage by interest rate. Not all debt deserves equal urgency. Credit card debt at 22% is a financial emergency. Student loans at 4% are a slow bleed. A mortgage at 3% might actually be worth carrying if the alternative investment returns are higher. Sort your debts by interest rate and attack the highest rate first while making minimums on everything else. This is the math optimal strategy. sometimes called the avalanche method, and it minimizes total interest paid over time. Some people prefer to pay off smallest balances first for psychological momentum, what's called the snowball method. The snowball costs slightly more in interest but produces motivational wins that help some people stay the course. Either works. Doing nothing works for nobody. Step 3 is the gap analysis. Once you know your debt costs, figure out what you can realistically throw at them above minimums. This might require the uncomfortable work of looking at where money is actually going versus where you think it's going. Not to generate shame, but to identify which spending is genuinely valuable to your life and which is automatic, habitual, or status-driven. There's usually money available that isn't visible until you look for it deliberately. Step 4 is the rate negotiation most people never try. Call your credit card company and ask for a lower rate. This works more often than you'd think because losing you as a customer costs them more than reducing your rate by a few points. A single phone call that takes 5 minutes can sometimes reduce your rate by 5 to 8 percentage points, saving you thousands in interest. Most people never try it because they don't know it's an option or feel awkward asking. The worst they can say is no. Step 5, and this is the one that separates people who escape the trap from people who pay it off and immediately fill it again, is understanding why you borrow before you borrow. This is behavioral, not mathematical. Most consumer debt isn't the result of emergency or genuine necessity. It's the result of present self overriding future self. You buy the thing because it's available and you want it, and the credit makes it feel affordable. The pain is deferred to a future self who will be less happy about it than present self is currently pleased by the purchase. Building friction into that decision, a 4-8 hour wait before any significant unplanned purchase, a calculation of what the purchase costs in compounding opportunity cost, a brief, honest conversation with yourself about whether this is a genuine value add or an impulse being serviced changes the equation without requiring superhuman willpower. You're not suppressing desire. You're inserting a pause between desire and action that allows the rational brain to participate in decisions the emotional brain would otherwise make alone. Here's a story that I think makes this concrete in a way the abstract math doesn't. There's a woman I know who graduated in 2012 with $44,000 in student loans and immediately added $8,000 in credit card debt in her first 2 years out of school, mostly from the cost of building a professional wardrobe and furnishing an apartment. By 2015, she had $52,000 in total debt, was making $58,000 a year, and felt like she was drowning. She did something that changed everything. She sat down one Saturday morning with coffee and a notebook and spent 4 hours calculating not what she owed, not what her payments were, but what the debt was costing her in compounding wealth she would never build. She did the math the way I've been describing it. And the number she came up with for her specific situation, in total lifetime wealth destruction from that $52,000 in debt at those rates over likely payoff periods, was $318,000. She sat with that number for a long time. $318,000. Not $52,000. Not what she owed. $318,000 in wealth her future self would never have. That number changed her relationship to debt in a way that no article about responsible spending ever had. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was a specific dollar amount she could hold in her mind. She went aggressive. She cut her lifestyle to bare essentials, picked up freelance work on weekends, put every extra dollar toward debt. She paid off the credit cards in 14 months and the student loans in another 4 years. By 2022, she was debt-free at 32. And instead of continuing to live like she was paying off debt, she redirected every dollar of those former payments into investments. She had $0 in debt and was investing $2,400 a month. In 3 years, she had $95,000 invested. She told me the moment she really felt free wasn't when she made the last debt payment. It was the first month when her brokerage account balance went up by more than she contributed. When the returns started to exceed the inputs, when the snowball started rolling on its own, she said, for years, compound interest was the enemy, and then one day it became the engine. That's the flip. That's what getting out of the debt trap actually feels like. It's not just financial relief, it's a reversal of polarity. The same mathematical force that had been silently extracting wealth from her for a decade suddenly became silently building it. Let me spend a moment on student loans specifically, because they deserve their own treatment, and because the conventional narrative around them has become so politically charged that the actual financial mechanics often get lost. Student loans are not inherently good or bad. They are a tool. And like any tool, their value depends entirely on what they're being used to build, and whether the thing they're building is worth the cost of the tool. Here's the framework I'd apply. What is the total cost of the credential, including interest over the full repayment period? What is the expected income premium the credential generates? Specifically, in your field, at the level of institution you're attending. How long does it take at that income premium to recoup the total cost of the credential? And what would the total cost of that credential have done in an index fund over your career? If you borrow $80,000 for a law degree from a good school, pass the bar, get a job paying $50,000 more per year than you'd have made otherwise, the recoupment period is roughly 5 years before interest, somewhat more after. That's potentially a reasonable bet. If you borrow $80,000 for a fine arts degree from a school that's not particularly prestigious in a field where the income premium relative to not having the degree is close to zero, you've paid $80,000 plus decades of interest for a credential that generated no measurable income return. That's not an investment. That's an expensive consumption purchase with lifelong repayment obligations attached. And the cruelty is that 8-year-olds are asked to make this bet with almost no financial literacy, enormous social pressure to attend college, regardless of the specific value equation, and advisors, guidance counselors, parents, admissions officers whose incentives are uniformly aligned toward enrollment rather than honest return on investment analysis. The system that originates student loans has no skin in the game on whether those loans generate career income sufficient to service them. The originator collects the fee, the servicer collects the interest. And the 2-year-old with $70,000 in debt and a psychology degree from a mid-tier school figures out the math alone after the fact when it's too late to undo. I'm not saying don't go to college. I'm saying apply the same rigorous cost-benefit analysis you'd apply to any other major financial commitment. Because a student loan is exactly that, a major financial commitment with multi-decade compounding implications. Treat it like one. Here's the bigger picture I want to leave you with, because I think the individual mechanics, as important as they are, can obscure something important about why this matters at scale. Consumer debt in America is now approaching $18 trillion. The average American household carries approximately $104,000 in total debt. Credit card debt alone has reached record highs. Buy now, pay later services, which are essentially unsecured credit with worse transparency than credit cards, have exploded, particularly among younger people and lower income households. We have built an economy where consumption is funded by borrowing at rates that systematically transfer wealth from the borrower to the lender, where the financial industry's most profitable products are the ones most destructive to their customers' long-term financial health, where the social signals around debt, the house, the car, the professional wardrobe, the lifestyle that looks like success, all push people toward more borrowing and deeper obligation. And then, when people struggle, the narrative blames individuals. You should have been more careful. You should have done the math. You should have made better choices. And there's some truth in that. Choices matter. Behavior matters. The math I've been showing you today is real and important, and ignoring it is genuinely costly. But holding individuals entirely responsible for a system that spent billions engineering their behavior toward maximum extraction is not honest. Both things are true simultaneously. The system is designed to trap you. And you can, with understanding and effort and the right framework, avoid the trap or escape it if you're already in it. These aren't contradictory. They're just the full picture. Your 3 takeaways, real ones, not the generic kind. First, consumer debt is not a payment problem. It's a compounding wealth destruction problem. The number that matters isn't what you owe. It's what that debt will cost you in total wealth over its full repayment period, including the opportunity cost of what that money would have built in an index fund. Run that number. Then decide how much urgency you feel. Second, minimum payments are not a responsible debt management strategy. They are an extraction mechanism designed to maximize the duration and cost of your obligation. If you are making minimum payments on high interest debt while contributing less than the maximum to investment accounts, you are borrowing at 22% to invest at 7%. That math is catastrophically backwards, and the sooner you see it clearly, the sooner you can fix it. Third, before you take on any debt, run 3 numbers. What is this going to cost me in total interest over the full repayment period? What would that total interest cost have compounded to in an index fund over the same period? And what is the specific return in income, in equity appreciation, in measurable value that this debt is generating on my behalf? If the answer to the third question is nothing, you're not borrowing, you're being borrowed from. And somewhere in a bank's quarterly earnings call, someone is celebrating your decision. Stop celebrating it for them.